Beau Radley laid his wife to rest under an old oak tree, but when her grave was dug up and a blood-soaked note was left behind, Beau unwrapped the rifle he swore never to touch again. The sun bled orange across the horizon, painting the weathered planks of Beau Radley's cabin in a fiery glow. 3 years. 3 years since he'd stood beneath the sprawling oak, the same oak now casting long, skeletal shadows, and watched them lower her into the earth. 3 years of silence, broken only by the wind whispering through the tall grass and the mournful hoot of owls. Beau emerged from the cabin, his movements slow, deliberate. Each day was the same. He fetched water from the well, chopped wood for the stove, and tended to the small patch of vegetables struggling in the arid soil. His face, etched with deep lines, told a story of hardship and loss. His eyes, once bright, were now clouded with a perpetual sadness. He walked towards the oak, his boots crunching on the dry earth. Beneath it, a simple wooden cross marked the grave. Sarah, it read, the letters faded by time and weather. He knelt, pulling a stray weed from the parched ground. The quiet routine was a shield, a way to keep the memories at bay. Memories of laughter, of shared dreams, of a love that had been cut short. He remembered her smile, the way her eyes sparkled in the sunlight. Now only the silence remained. He placed a single wildflower on the grave, a splash of color against the muted landscape. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in shadows, Beau lingered. He was a man haunted by the past, trapped in a cycle of grief and solitude. He didn't know that tonight that quiet would be shattered, and the life he had carefully constructed would be irrevocably changed. The peace he had sought would be replaced by a storm of questions, forcing him to confront secrets he never imagined existed. The next morning, a harsh glare woke Beau. He rose, the memory of the previous evening heavy in his heart. He walked to the window, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. Something felt different, wrong. He went to the oak tree, his usual routine. But as he approached, he stopped dead in his tracks. The grave was disturbed. Dirt was scattered around the edges, the wooden cross tilted at an unnatural angle. A cold dread washed over him. He rushed forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He knelt and began to frantically dig, his hands tearing at the earth. It wasn't long before he reached the coffin. The lid was ajar, splintered wood revealing the darkness within. With trembling hands, he pulled the lid open further. The coffin was empty. A gasp escaped his lips. Where was she? Then his eyes caught a glimpse of something lying on the bottom of the coffin, a folded piece of paper stained crimson. He reached in and unfolded the note, his hands shaking so violently he almost dropped it. The words were scrawled in a crude, hurried hand, "You buried the wrong woman." The words hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back, his mind reeling. Wrong woman, what did it mean? His Sarah, the woman he had loved and lost, buried in this very spot, it couldn't be. Rage, cold and sharp, began to simmer beneath the surface of his grief. Who would do this? Who would desecrate her grave and leave such a cryptic, horrifying message? His quiet life, the fragile piece he had managed to find, shattered into a million pieces. He clenched the note in his fist, his knuckles white. The hunt had begun. Beau saddled his horse, a weathered Appaloosa named Shadow, the blood-stained note tucked securely inside his vest. He hadn't been to town in years, not since the funeral. The thought of facing those faces, of stirring up memories, filled him with a deep reluctance. But he had no choice. He had to find out what happened to Sarah, what that note meant. The ride was long and arduous, the sun beating down on his back. As he crested the final hill, the town came into view, a cluster of sun-baked buildings huddled together against the vast expanse of the desert. Dust devils danced in the distance, mirroring the turmoil in his heart. He urged Shadow forward, the rhythmic beat of hooves the only sound. As he entered the town, heads turned, conversations ceased. Eyes followed him, filled with a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and fear. He was an outsider, a ghost from their past. The town was quiet, deceptively so. A gentle breeze stirred the dust in the streets, carrying with it the whispers of the townsfolk. He could feel their gaze on him, hear the murmur of their voices, though he couldn't make out the words. He rode down Main Street, past the general store, the saloon, and the church. The buildings looked the same as he remembered, but the atmosphere was different. There was a tension in the air, a sense of unease that settled over him like a shroud. He dismounted in front of the saloon, the swinging doors creaking in protest. He tied Shadow to the hitching post and took a deep breath. He was back. And he wouldn't leave until he had answers. The whispers intensified as he stepped inside. The hunt had truly begun. The saloon doors swung shut behind Beau, cutting off the harsh sunlight. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of stale beer and tobacco smoke. A few men sat at tables, their eyes fixed on him. The piano player, a gaunt man with weary eyes, stopped playing mid-note. Bo approached the bar, the silence amplifying his footsteps. The bartender, a burly man with a handlebar mustache, eyed him with suspicion. "Whiskey," Bo said, his voice rough. He tossed a coin onto the counter. As he drank, he observed the room, trying to gauge the mood. He recognized a few faces from years past, but they seemed older, harder. He finished his drink and turned to the bartender. "I'm looking for information about my wife, Sarah. She's buried just outside of town." The bartender's eyes narrowed. "Sarah's been dead for 3 years. What more is there to know?" "Her grave was disturbed," Bo said, his voice low, "and I found a note." He didn't elaborate. "Anything you can tell me about her, anything at all." The bartender hesitated, then wiped down the counter with a rag. "Sarah was a good woman, quiet, kept to herself." He offered nothing more. Bo left the saloon and headed for the sheriff's office. Sheriff Brody was an older man, his face lined with years of law enforcement. He listened to Bo's story with a skeptical expression. "Grave robbing is a serious offense, Bo, but a note sounds like a prank." "It wasn't a prank," Bo insisted. "Something's not right. I need your help." Brody sighed. "I'll look into it, but don't expect much. Sarah's gone, let her rest." Bo knew he wouldn't get much help from the sheriff. He spent the rest of the day talking to other townsfolk, the store owner, a few neighbors. Each conversation was the same, polite but evasive. Everyone seemed to be holding something back. The mystery surrounding Sarah and the reason for the note deepened with each passing hour. He was alone in this. Frustrated by the lack of cooperation in town, Bo returned to his cabin, the weight of unanswered questions pressing down on him. If the townsfolk wouldn't talk, he'd have to find the answers himself. He started with Sarah's belongings, the few items he had packed away after her death. He rummaged through a dusty trunk, carefully unfolding old dresses and shawls, each piece a painful reminder of the life they had shared. He found a small wooden box tucked away at the bottom. It was locked. He hesitated, then grabbed his knife and carefully picked the lock. Inside, nestled among faded ribbons and dried flowers, was a locket. Silver, intricately engraved with a floral design. He opened it and his breath caught in his throat. Inside were two tiny photographs. One was of Sarah, younger, her eyes full of life. The other was of a man Bo didn't recognize. He was handsome, with a rugged face and piercing eyes. He wore a dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat, the attire of a gunslinger. Bo stared at the picture, a wave of confusion washing over him. Who was this man, and why did Sarah have his picture hidden away in a locket? He had known Sarah for years, courted her, married her. He thought he knew everything about her. The locket felt cold in his hand, a tangible piece of a past he was only beginning to uncover. It was a betrayal, a secret Sarah had kept hidden from him. The anger he had been suppressing began to bubble to the surface. He closed the locket, the image of the unknown man burned into his memory. This was his first real clue, a thread he could pull to unravel the truth. He had to find out who this man was and what he had to do with Sarah. His determination hardened. He wasn't alone in Sarah's past, and he would find out who shared it with her, no matter the cost. Armed with the image from the locket, Bo returned to town the next day. He remembered Sarah mentioning a close friend, Martha, who worked at the dressmaker's shop. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead he had. He found Martha stitching a delicate lace onto a gown. Her face was pale, her eyes darting nervously as he entered. "Martha," Bo said, his voice gentle, "it's been a while." She swallowed hard. "Bo, what brings you back?" He held out the locket, open to the picture of the unknown man. "Do you recognize this man, Martha?" Her eyes widened and she recoiled slightly. I don't know him." Her voice trembled. Bo narrowed his eyes. "Don't lie to me, Martha. Sarah was your friend. Tell me who he is." "I can't," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "It's better if you just leave it alone, Bo." "Leave it alone?" Bo's voice rose, his frustration boiling over. "My wife's grave was robbed, and I found this in her belongings. I deserve answers." A man emerged from the back of the shop, a burly figure with a menacing glare. "Martha, is there a problem?" "No, Mr. Henderson," she stammered, "just an old acquaintance." Henderson fixed his gaze on Bo. "I suggest you leave, mister. You're disturbing my business." "I'm just asking questions about my wife." Bo replied, his hand instinctively moving towards his sidearm. Some things are best left buried, Henderson said, his voice a low growl, for your own good. The air crackled with tension. Bo knew he was being threatened. He took a step back, realizing he was outmatched. I'll find out the truth, Henderson, he said, his voice hard, one way or another. He left the shop, the veiled threat hanging heavy in the air. He knew then that he was walking into something dangerous, something far bigger than he had imagined. He wasn't just uncovering Sarah's secrets, he was stirring up a hornet's nest. As Bo walked away from the dressmaker's shop, the image of Henderson's threatening face faded, replaced by another, much brighter one. A memory flickered, unbidden, transporting him back in time. Flashback. The sun was shining, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of wildflowers. Bo and Sarah were picnicking by a clear, rushing stream. Sarah laughed, her eyes sparkling as she chased a butterfly through the tall grass. Bo watched her, his heart filled with a love so profound it almost hurt. He remembered the day he asked her to marry him down by that same stream. He had carved their initials into the bark of a nearby tree, a symbol of their enduring love. They had built a life together, a simple life but filled with joy and contentment. He remembered dancing with her at the town social, her hand in his, her smile lighting up the room. He remembered the quiet evenings spent on their porch, watching the sunset, sharing their dreams for the future. End flashback. The memory faded, leaving Bo standing alone in the dusty street, the harsh reality of his present situation crashing down on him. The contrast between the vibrant happiness of the past and the grim uncertainty of the present was stark, almost unbearable. The flashback served as a painful reminder of what he had lost, of the love that had been stolen from him. It fueled his determination to uncover the truth, to avenge Sarah's memory, and to find some measure of peace in the midst of the chaos. He would not let her secrets or her enemies win. The memory of their love was a beacon, guiding him through the darkness. He would find the truth, no matter the cost. He owed it to her. He owed it to himself. Bo knew he couldn't stay in town any longer. The air was thick with secrets and veiled threats. He needed to find out who the man in the locket was. He decided to visit the county record's office in the next town over, hoping to find some information about wanted outlaws from years past. The record's office was a dusty, cluttered room filled with stacks of yellowed documents. The clerk, a wizened old man with spectacles perched on his nose, eyed Bo with suspicion. Bo showed him the picture from the locket. "I'm trying to identify this man," he said. "Any chance he's been through here?" The clerk squinted at the picture, then shuffled through a pile of old wanted posters. After a few minutes, he stopped. "Looks like a man named Jesse Calhoun," he said, pointing to a faded poster. "Wanted for robbery, murder, and a whole host of other crimes." Bo's heart sank. Jesse Calhoun. The name rang a bell, a distant echo from his past. He remembered hearing stories about the notorious outlaw, a ruthless killer who had terrorized the region years ago. "What happened to him?" Bo asked. "They say he was killed in a shootout with the law," the clerk replied. "About 10 years ago, body was never recovered, but everyone figured he was dead." Dead? If Jesse Calhoun was dead, why did Sarah have his picture hidden in a locket? And why was someone trying to make him believe he had buried the wrong woman? The questions swirled in his mind, creating a vortex of confusion and suspicion. He thanked the clerk and left the record's office, the weight of his discovery heavy on his shoulders. Sarah had been connected to a wanted outlaw, a man who was supposed to be dead. This changed everything. He wasn't just dealing with a simple mystery, he was uncovering a web of lies, secrets, and potentially deadly consequences. The stakes had just been raised. Bo returned to town, his mind racing. He needed to find someone who would tell him the truth about Sarah and Jesse Calhoun. He decided to seek out the town's oldest resident, a woman named Elsie who lived on the outskirts of town and was known for her sharp memory and keen observations. Elsie was frail but sharp-witted. He showed her the picture of Jesse Calhoun. "Do you recognize this man, Elsie?" Elsie peered at the picture through her thick glasses. "That's Jesse Calhoun," she said, her voice raspy. "A bad man. He caused a lot of trouble in these parts." "Did you know my wife, Sarah?" Bo asked. Elsie hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I knew her. She was a kind woman, but she got mixed up with the wrong crowd." "What do you mean?" Bo pressed. "She was helping Calhoun," Elsie said, her voice barely a whisper. hiding him, providing him with supplies. I don't know why. Maybe she was scared, maybe she was forced. Bo felt a wave of betrayal wash over him. His Sarah helping a notorious outlaw, it seemed impossible, but Elsie's words rang true. Who else was involved? Bo asked. Elsie hesitated again, her eyes filled with fear. I can't say, she whispered. They're powerful men, they'll come after me. Please, Elsie, Bo pleaded. I need to know. She looked at him, her eyes filled with pity. Henderson was involved, she said, naming the man from the dressmaker's shop, and Mayor Bartlett, they were all in Calhoun's pocket. Bo's blood ran cold. Henderson and Bartlett, two of the most respected men in town, were secretly aiding a wanted outlaw. It was a conspiracy that ran deep. Sarah had been caught in the middle, possibly forced to help them. The pieces were finally starting to fall into place, revealing a dark and twisted truth. The betrayal cut deep. He had to confront them. Leaving Elsie's, Bo knew he was a marked man. Henderson and Bartlett wouldn't let him get away with what he knew. He needed to be careful. He decided to head back to his cabin, gather his thoughts, and plan his next move. As he rode along the deserted road, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. He had a bad feeling, a sense of impending danger that prickled his skin. He scanned the horizon, his senses on high alert. Suddenly, a volley of gunfire erupted from the rocks beside the road. Bullets whizzed past him, kicking up dust. Bo ducked low on shadow, urging the horse into a gallop. He was being ambushed. He returned fire, blindly shooting towards the source of the attack. He recognized the men, two of Henderson's thugs, known for their ruthless efficiency. They were trying to silence him permanently. He managed to outrun them, Shadow's speed and agility saving his life. He reached his cabin, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He barricaded the door and windows, knowing they would be back. The ambush confirmed his worst fears. He wasn't just uncovering secrets, he was up against powerful and dangerous men who would stop at nothing to protect themselves. The conspiracy ran deeper than he had imagined. They were willing to kill to keep the truth buried. He realized he was alone with no one to trust but himself. The sheriff was likely in Bartlett's pocket. He was on his own against a town full of enemies. The showdown was coming. He just needed to decide when and where. He would make them pay for what they did to Sarah. He would make them pay for trying to kill him. The rage within him burned hotter than ever. Barricaded in his cabin, Bo wrestled with his conscience. The urge for revenge was almost overwhelming. He could ride into town, guns blazing, and make Henderson and Bartlett pay for their crimes. He had the skills, honed from years of war and hardship. It would be quick, brutal, and satisfying. But what then? Would it bring Sarah back? Would it ease the pain in his heart? Or would it simply leave him a hollow shell, consumed by hatred and violence? He remembered Sarah's gentle nature, her belief in justice and fairness. She wouldn't want him to become a killer. He considered the other option, trying to expose the truth through legal means. But the sheriff was corrupt and the town was under Bartlett's control. Who would believe him? He had no proof, only Elsie's word and his own suspicions. He paced the floor, his mind a battlefield. Revenge or justice? Bloodshed or redemption? It was a moral crossroads, a test of his character. He could succumb to his rage and become the monster they wanted him to be, or he could rise above it and fight for what was right, even if it meant risking his life. He thought of Sarah, of her unwavering spirit, of her belief in the goodness of people. He knew what she would want him to do. He had to find a way to expose the truth, to bring Henderson and Bartlett to justice, without resorting to violence. It would be difficult, perhaps even impossible, but he had to try, for Sarah, for himself. He needed to find evidence, something tangible that would convince the town of the conspiracy. He needed a plan, and he needed to be smarter than his enemies. The path to redemption was narrow, but he would walk it. Bo decided to play his hand carefully. He couldn't go to the sheriff, and he didn't have concrete proof. He needed to force Bartlett's hand to make him reveal his involvement. He knew Bartlett valued his reputation above all else. He rode into town, deliberately making his presence known. He walked straight to the mayor's office, ignoring the wary glances of the townsfolk. He barged in without knocking, finding Bartlett sitting behind his large oak desk, looking every inch the respectable mayor. Bartlett, Bo said, his voice cold and hard. Bartlett looked up, his face hardening. Radley, what do you want? I know about Sarah and Jesse Calhoun, Bo said, his eyes fixed on the mayor's. I know she was helping him, and I know you were involved. Bartlett's face remained impassive. You're making wild accusations, Radley. I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Bo said, stepping closer. I know you were in Calhoun's pocket. You and Henderson, you were using Sarah. Why? Bartlett stood up, his face flushed with anger. Get out of my office, Radley, before I call the sheriff. The sheriff's in your pocket too, isn't he? Bo sneered. The whole town's corrupt, but I'm not going anywhere until I get answers. You're a fool, Radley, Bartlett said, his voice low and menacing. You have no proof, it's your word against mine. I'll find proof, Bo said, his hand instinctively moving towards his sidearm. And when I do, you'll pay for what you did to Sarah. You're playing a dangerous game, Radley, Bartlett said, his eyes filled with hatred. One you can't win. We'll see about that, Bo replied, his voice unwavering. He turned and walked out of the office, leaving Bartlett seething with rage. The confrontation had been tense, a war of words that had revealed the depth of the animosity between them. Bo knew he was running out of time. The showdown was inevitable. As Bo left the mayor's office, he knew he had to act fast. He needed proof, and he suspected it was hidden somewhere in Bartlett's office. He waited until nightfall, the town silent and still. He crept back to the mayor's office, picking the lock with ease. Inside, he searched frantically through the drawers and cabinets, finding nothing but mundane documents. Just as he was about to give up, he noticed a loose floorboard under the desk. He pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a strongbox. He quickly picked the lock and opened it. Inside were documents detailing Bartlett's financial dealings with Jesse Calhoun, proving he had been secretly funding the outlaw's operations. There was also a letter from Sarah begging Bartlett to leave her alone, implying she was being blackmailed. Suddenly, the door burst open. Bartlett stood there, a shotgun in his hands, his face contorted with rage. I knew you'd come back, he snarled. It's over, Bartlett, Bo said, holding up the documents. I have everything I need. You'll never leave this town alive, Bartlett roared, firing the shotgun. Bo ducked, the pellets whizzing past his head. He drew his own weapon, his war-honed instincts taking over. He moved with speed and precision, years of combat experience kicking in. A fierce gunfight erupted, bullets flying through the small office. Bo used the desk for cover, returning fire with deadly accuracy. He shot the shotgun out of Bartlett's hands, then advanced, forcing the mayor to retreat. The fight spilled out into the street, drawing the attention of the townsfolk. They watched in stunned silence as Bo and Bartlett engaged in a deadly dance. Bo, fueled by grief and rage, fought with a ferocity he hadn't known he possessed. He disarmed Bartlett and pinned him to the ground, his gun pointed at the mayor's head. The climax had arrived. The moment of truth was at hand. Bo pressed the gun harder against Bartlett's head, his finger tightening on the trigger. The townsfolk watched, their faces a mixture of fear and anticipation. He could pull the trigger, end it all right there. Revenge would be swift and complete, but he hesitated. He looked at the faces in the crowd, saw the fear in their eyes. He thought of Sarah, of her belief in justice. He couldn't become a killer, not even for her. He lowered the gun, the tension in the air almost palpable. It's over, Bartlett, he said, his voice hoarse. You're going to jail. He stood up and addressed the crowd, holding up the documents he had found in the strongbox. This is proof that Bartlett was working with Jesse Calhoun, he said, his voice ringing out in the silence. He was funding Calhoun's operations, and he was blackmailing my wife. The townsfolk gasped, their faces filled with shock and disbelief. The spell of Bartlett's influence was broken. They had seen the truth, and they could no longer deny it. Sheriff Brody, finally realizing the gravity of the situation, stepped forward, his face pale. Bartlett, you're under arrest, he said, his voice trembling. The townsfolk surged forward, surrounding Bartlett and Henderson, who had emerged from the saloon, his face a mask of fury. They were taken into custody, their reign of terror finally over. Bo had defeated his enemies, exposing the truth about Sarah and the conspiracy that had destroyed her life. He had chosen justice over revenge, redemption over bloodshed. But his journey was far from over. He still had to decide what to do with his life now that the truth was out. He had won the battle, but the war within him still raged. The dust settled both literally and figuratively. The town was changed, the conspiracy exposed, the guilty brought to justice. But Bo was still haunted by the past, by the secrets he had uncovered, by the betrayal he had endured. He stood by Sarah's grave, the oak tree casting its familiar shadow. The cross had been repaired, the earth smoothed. He had finally given her peace, but what about himself? He looked at the town, saw the faces of the people who had once shunned him, now offering him tentative smiles. Some had even offered him a place to stay, a chance to rebuild his life. He could stay, become a part of the community, help rebuild the town, find a new purpose. But the thought of settling down, of putting down roots, filled him with a sense of unease. He was a wanderer, a loner. The war had changed him, hardened him. He didn't know if he could ever truly belong anywhere. He made his decision. He saddled Shadow, packed his few belongings, and rode out of town as the sun began to rise. He didn't look back. The final shot mirrored the opening scene, Bo riding away from the town, the vast expanse of the desert stretching before him. But this time there was a subtle difference in his posture, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. He was still a solitary figure, forever changed by what he had learned. But he was also free. Free from the secrets, free from the lies, free to find his own path wherever it may lead. The question remained, would he ever truly find peace, or would he forever be haunted by the ghost of Sarah and the shadows of the past? The answer remained uncertain, lost in the vastness of the western landscape. Perhaps in time the war within him would finally cease. Perhaps.